The jungle screamed with gunfire, and Nathan Cole's eyes went blank, like a machine switched off. Bullets tore through leaves, shredding the air around me, and the hostages' cries pierced the chaos. I stood frozen, not from fear, but from the weight of a truth I had buried. I was never meant to lead. Yet here I was, watching our commander crumble, knowing every second I hesitated would bury us all. My name is Sarah Kane, and I am a captain in an elite unit where trust is earned in blood. Hours ago, in a briefing room thick with the scent of coffee and arrogance, I sat apart, my spine rigid, studying maps while my team traded jokes. Lieutenant Ethan Drake's voice cut through their laughter. "There's our token, Captain. Checking boxes." His words landed like a blade, but I kept my face still, my pen tracing jungle rivers that could drown us. I had learned silence was my shield. Colonel David Harper barely glanced my way when I warned of seasonal floods. "Noted, Captain," he said, dismissing me. Nathan Cole, our golden leader with a chest full of medals, smirked and moved on. They thought I was decoration. They were wrong. Now, in this suffocating jungle, with rain soaking my uniform and mud caking my boots, their dismissal felt distant. Nathan knelt behind a tree, his radio spitting static, his mouth moving without sound. 2 soldiers lay bleeding, their groans swallowed by the roar of enemy fire. Ethan shouted, "Captain, we need orders!" His voice cracked, stripped of its earlier mockery. Nathan did not move. The team's eyes darted to me, desperate, accusing, pleading. I felt the weight of their lives, heavier than the rifle in my hands. I crouched low, the air thick with the stench of gunpowder and wet earth. My heart pounded, not from the bullets, but from a memory that clawed its way up. A mission 2 years ago, a mentor's betrayal, his voice sneering, "You will never be enough." I had sworn never to let that voice win. I scanned the chaos, 8 hostages trapped in a compound ahead, our extraction point overrun, communications dead. We were cornered, and Nathan was gone, locked in his own mind. "Move the wounded behind that ridge," I ordered, my voice sharp, cutting through the panic. Specialist Ryan Torres hesitated, glancing at Nathan. "Now, Torres," I snapped. He nodded, dragging a bleeding soldier to cover. "Ethan, take 2 men, secure the west flank." "Michael, get the hostages into that depression, establish covering fire south." Sergeant Michael Chen, the only one who had never mocked me, moved instantly, his trust a lifeline. Ethan froze, his jaw tight. "Who put you in charge?" "Do it," Michael growled, his eyes on me, steady. Ethan cursed but signaled 2 soldiers, sprinting west. I knelt beside Nathan, his face pale, eyes distant. "Sir, I am assuming command until you are operational." "Acknowledge." He blinked, a faint nod his only response. It was enough. I stood, my pulse racing, and pulled the backup radio from my pack, the one Nathan had laughed at, the one I carried because betrayal had taught me to plan for failure. Bullets slammed into trees, splintering bark. I crouched, entering codes I had memorized in a life that felt a world away. Tango 3 Delta Authentication Sierra. November 9, 7-2. Emergency extraction, alternate grid coordinates, multiple casualties, civilians present. Static answered, and my breath caught. The team watched me, doubt flickering in their eyes. Then a voice crackled through. "Tango 3 Delta Echo Base, coordinates received. Extraction team deploying, ETA 90 minutes. Relief flooded me, sharp and brief. 90 minutes. We had to survive that long. I turned to the team, their faces smeared with mud and fear. "We move to the hostage compound now. Stay low, follow my lead." Michael nodded, but Ethan's eyes burned with resentment. The hostages were our mission, our reason for being here. I thought of their faces, unseen but real, families waiting back home. I thought of my own family, a photograph tucked in my locker, the only piece of me I let the world see. Gunfire erupted closer, a grenade exploding yards away, showering us with dirt. The jungle seemed to tighten around us, its shadows hiding enemies I could not see. I gripped my rifle, my fingers steady despite the chaos. The backup radio had worked, but the enemy was closing in, and Nathan's silence haunted me. I had taken command, but could I carry the weight of their lives? As we moved toward the compound, a scream echoed from the trees ahead, sharp and human. My stomach twisted. The hostages, we were running out of time. The scream lingered in the jungle air, sharp and raw, like a wound torn open. I crouched behind a fallen log, my rifle pressed against my shoulder, the damp wood cold against my cheek. The hostages were close, their fear a pulse I could feel through the trees, but the enemy was closer. Bullets snapped overhead, shredding leaves, and the stench of cordite burned my throat. My team huddled around me, their breaths ragged, waiting for my next move. I was Captain Sarah Kane, and I had just taken command from a man they worshipped. Their eyes bore into me, some trusting, some doubting, all desperate. Hours earlier, in the base's armory, I had checked my gear with a precision that bordered on obsession. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the concrete floor. My locker was a study in order, folded uniforms, a single photograph of my old unit, and a drawer of medals I never displayed. Lieutenant Ethan Drake's voice had cut through the chatter of my teammates. "Planning to rewrite the mission, Captain?" His tone dripped with mockery as he leaned against his locker, his combat vest slung carelessly over one shoulder. I did not look up, my fingers tracing the backup radio's edges. "Just being thorough, Lieutenant." He snorted. "This is Cole's show. Stay out of the way and look good for the photos." I zipped my bag, the sound sharp, and let his words slide off me. I had heard worse. 2 years ago, in a desert half a world away, a commander had called me a liability. His betrayal still burned, a scar I carried in silence. Now, in this suffocating jungle, Ethan's skepticism felt like a distant echo. I signaled Michael Chen to my left, his dark eyes steady, the only ones who had never questioned me. "Michael, scout the compound's perimeter. Look for guard patterns." He nodded, slipping into the undergrowth like a shadow. Ethan crouched to my right, his jaw tight, his earlier bravado replaced by tension. "This is a mistake," he muttered. "Cole will snap out of it. You're overstepping." I met his gaze, my voice low. "Cole is not here, Ethan. I am. Help me or stay out of my way." He looked away, his silence a grudging concession. The jungle pressed in, its humidity a weight on my skin. Vines tangled underfoot, and the air smelled of rot and rain. I scanned the terrain, my mind racing. The compound was 100 yards ahead, a crude wooden structure hidden by trees. My warning about fresh boot prints had been ignored, but I saw them again now, sharp-edged, unmarred by rain. The enemy was near, moving parallel to us. I had served in this region before, knew its seasonal floods and hidden paths. Nathan Cole had dismissed my knowledge, but I would not let it fail us now. Michael returned, his face grim. "2 guards, rotating every 10 minutes. No sign of explosives, but the approach is exposed." I nodded, my mind mapping the terrain. "We breach on the next rotation." "Ryan, prep a charge for the door." Specialist Ryan Torres, young and eager, fumbled with his pack but nodded. Ethan shifted, his voice sharp. "You're rushing this." "We should wait for Cole." I turned to him, my patience fraying. "Wait, and those hostages die. Move or I leave you behind." He glared but fell silent, his resentment a palpable heat. We advanced, low and silent, the jungle's chorus of insects masking our steps. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from a memory that clawed at me, a mission gone wrong, a civilian's scream, my failure to act fast enough. I had sworn never to hesitate again. The compound loomed ahead, its wooden walls weathered, a faint light flickering inside. The hostages were there, alive, but for how long? I signaled the team to halt, my eyes catching a glint in the underbrush. A thin wire, nearly invisible, stretched across our path. Tripwire. "Freeze," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Ryan stopped mid-step, his boot inches from the wire. The team held their breath, the jungle suddenly silent, as if it knew. I knelt, my fingers brushing the damp earth, tracing the wire to a crude explosive hidden in the roots of a tree. My pulse steadied, training taking over. I had disarmed worse in training, but never with lives hanging in the balance. "Michael, cover me," I said, pulling a multi-tool from my vest. He nodded, his rifle trained on the trees. Ethan hissed, "This is why we needed Cole. You're going to get us killed." I ignored him, my focus on the wire. The device was simple but deadly, a pressure trigger wired to shrapnel. My hands moved with precision, cutting the wire, disabling the detonator. Sweat stung my eyes, but I did not blink. The device went dead, and I exhaled, the team's tension easing. "Clear," I said, standing. Michael gave me a nod, respect in his eyes. Ethan said nothing, his silence louder than words. I turned to Nathan, still crouched behind a tree, his face pale, eyes unfocused. He had not spoken since the ambush, his silence a weight I could not ignore. "Sir, we are breaching the compound. Can you move?" He blinked, his lips parting, but no words came. I gripped his shoulder, firm but gentle. "Stay with Ryan. We will get you out." He nodded faintly, and I wondered what had broken him. A man with 3 successful extractions, now reduced to a ghost. The guard's rotation was seconds away. I signaled the team to advance, my rifle raised, the compound's door in sight. My mind raced, calculating angles, risks, lives, 8 hostages, 2 guards, 90 minutes until extraction. The numbers grounded me, but the scream from earlier haunted me. Was it a hostage? A trap? I pushed the thought down, focusing on the door. Ryan placed the charge, his hands steadier now. Michael flanked left, Ethan right. I took point, my body coiled, ready. The charge detonated, a sharp crack that split the silence. We breached, rushing inside, the air thick with dust and fear. 8 civilians huddled against the wall, their faces pale, eyes wide. "United States military," I said, my voice clear. "We are getting you out." A middle-aged man, his shirt torn, nodded, his voice trembling. "They check every 10 minutes. They are coming." My stomach twisted. Time was gone. Gunfire erupted outside, closer now, the enemy closing in. My radio crackled. "Captain, they are pushing from the north." Ethan's voice, urgent, no trace of mockery. I turned to the hostages. "Single file, stay low, follow my team." They scrambled to their feet, their fear a mirror of my own, buried deep. I positioned myself at the rear, shielding them, my rifle trained on the door. The jungle roared with chaos, and Nathan's silence loomed like a shadow. I had saved us from the tripwire, but the enemy was here, and our escape was a thread about to snap. The compound's wooden walls shuddered as gunfire tore through the jungle outside, each shot a hammer against my chest. I stood at the rear of the hostage group, my rifle raised, the air thick with dust and the sour stench of fear. 8 civilians crouched before me, their breaths ragged, eyes darting to the splintered door we had just breached. They trusted me, Captain Sarah Kane, to lead them out of this hell. But the enemy was closing in, and Nathan Cole's silence, his empty stare from the corner of the room, reminded me I was alone in this fight. Minutes ago, we had blown the door, rushing into this dim, suffocating space. The hostages had stared at us like we were ghosts, their faces gaunt, clothes torn. A woman clutched a teenage boy, her knuckles white. The middle-aged man who spoke earlier, his shirt stained with sweat, had warned of guards returning. Now, as I scanned the room, my pulse raced, not from the gunfire, but from a memory that clawed its way up. A desert night, a civilian's scream, my hesitation costing a life. I had been too slow then, a rookie under a commander who saw me as a burden. I would not fail these people now. "Move, single file, stay low," I ordered, my voice steady despite the chaos. Sergeant Michael Chen took point, his rifle trained on the door. Specialist Ryan Torres flanked the hostages, his young face tense but focused. Lieutenant Ethan Drake was outside, holding the perimeter with two others, his voice crackling over the radio. "Captain, they're pushing hard from the north. We can't hold long." I pressed my comm. "Fall back to the depression, Ethan." "We're coming out." The hostages shuffled forward, their steps hesitant, fear binding them together like a chain. I glanced at Nathan, slumped against the wall, his hands trembling on his useless radio. "Sir, we're moving." "Can you walk?" His eyes flicked to me, briefly lucid, then drifted away. I grabbed his arm, pulling him to his feet. "Stay with Ryan." "Move." He nodded faintly, stumbling after the group. My stomach twisted. Nathan Cole, the man with a chest full of medals, was a shell, and I was carrying his weight, his failure, on top of my own. We emerged into the jungle, the air heavy with humidity and the acrid burn of gunpowder. Bullets snapped through the trees, splintering bark, and a grenade exploded 50 yards away, showering us with dirt. The hostages flinched, the teenage boy stifling a cry. "Keep moving," I hissed, positioning myself at the rear, my body a shield between them and the unseen enemy. Michael led us toward a shallow depression in the terrain, a natural trench where Ethan's team waited. The jungle was alive, its shadows shifting, hiding snipers I could feel watching us. My boots sank into the mud, each step a battle against the terrain. Vines snagged at my legs, and the rain-soaked canopy dripped onto my neck, cold and relentless. I scanned the trees, my senses razor-sharp. I had served here 2 years ago, knew the jungle's tricks, its hidden streams, its sudden silences. Earlier, I had spotted fresh boot prints, ignored by Nathan. Now, the birds had gone quiet, a warning I could not dismiss. The enemy was circling, and our extraction point, 2 kilometers away, felt like a dream. We reached the depression, sliding into its muddy embrace. Ethan knelt behind a fallen log, his rifle firing controlled bursts. "Took you long enough," he said, his voice tight, no trace of his earlier mockery. 2 soldiers beside him, Mason and Rodriguez, laid down suppressive fire. The hostages huddled low, their faces pale, the woman still clutching the boy. Michael checked his watch. 75 minutes to extraction, Captain. The LZ's compromised." I nodded, my mind racing. The alternate extraction point I had radioed was our only hope, but reaching it meant crossing a clearing, a killing field. I crouched beside the hostages, my voice calm. "You're doing well. We're getting you out, but you need to move fast when I say. Understand?" The middle-aged man, his eyes bloodshot, nodded. "We trust you." His words hit me like a fist, heavy with responsibility. I turned to Michael. We split into 3 groups. I'll lead the first across the clearing to secure the far side. "You bring the hostages next. Ethan, your team covers and brings the wounded last." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That puts you in the open first." "Suicide." I met his gaze. "I know the terrain. It's our only shot." Michael touched my arm, his voice low. "You're taking the worst of it, Sarah." I shrugged, forcing a calm I did not feel. "Someone has to." But inside a voice whispered, a voice from that desert night, my commander's sneer. "You'll never be enough." I pushed it down, focusing on the clearing ahead, its open ground a gauntlet of death. I had to prove that voice wrong, not for me, but for the lives behind me. Flashback to my first mission in this region. I was a lieutenant, eager, trailing a mentor who saw my gender as a flaw. We navigated a flooded jungle, and I had warned of a hidden ravine. He ignored me, and 2 soldiers drowned. His blame was swift, his words cutting. "You don't belong here." That failure shaped me, drove me to study every map, every frequency, every contingency. It was why I carried the backup radio Nathan mocked, why I saw the boot prints others missed. I would not let history repeat. "On my signal," I said, gripping my rifle. The team spread out, Nathan with Ryan, his steps unsteady but moving. The clearing loomed, 100 yards of exposed ground, the far tree line our only cover. Bullets whined overhead and my heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of what came next. I took a breath, the air tasting of earth and blood, and burst from cover, sprinting low, my team behind me. Dirt kicked up around us, enemy fire finding its mark. Halfway across, Private Watson screamed, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. I pivoted, instinct overriding thought, and ran to him. "Keep moving!" I shouted, hoisting him to his feet, half carrying him toward the tree line. My muscles burned, his weight dragging me down, but I did not stop. We reached cover, collapsing behind a tree, my chest heaving. Watson groaned, his face pale. "Stay with him," I ordered Rodriguez, who nodded, already applying pressure to the wound. I turned to the clearing, signaling Michael. "Your turn?" "Move!" Michael led the hostages at a sprint, their faces etched with terror but determined. My team fired at muzzle flashes in the jungle, suppressing the enemy. The hostages made it across, unharmed, tumbling into the underbrush beside me. Relief flooded me, sharp and fleeting. Ethan's team was last, carrying 2 wounded, Nathan among them. They started across, slower, vulnerable. A grenade arced from the trees, landing meters from their path, its metal glint a promise of death. Time slowed. I saw the hostages' faces, the boy's eyes wide, the woman's scream. I saw Watson's blood on my hands, Nathan's empty stare. I saw that desert night, my failure, my shame. I would not lose them. I broke from cover, sprinting toward the grenade, my heart a drum in my chest. The world narrowed to that small, deadly object, and I knew I might not make it. My boots pounded the earth, each step a thunderclap in the chaos of the jungle. The grenade lay in the clearing, a dull metal sphere glinting in the dappled light, its fuse hissing like a snake. Bullets whined past me, kicking up dirt, but my world had narrowed to that single object, a ticking promise of death. I was Captain Sarah Kane, and I had seconds to save my team, or join the ghosts of my past. The clearing stretched before me, 100 yards of exposed ground, the far tree line a distant sanctuary where my team huddled. Lieutenant Ethan Drake's group was halfway across, 2 soldiers dragging a wounded man, Nathan Cole stumbling beside them. The hostages, safe for now, crouched with Sergeant Michael Chen, their faces pale with terror. I had led my group across first, carrying Private Watson's bleeding body to cover, but this grenade threatened to undo everything. My heart slammed against my ribs, not from fear, but from a memory that burned. A desert mission, a child's scream, my hesitation costing a life. I would not fail again. I reached the grenade, my hands steady despite the chaos. Time slowed, the jungle's roar fading to a dull hum. I scooped it up, its weight cold and heavy, and hurled it back toward the enemy's muzzle, flashes in the trees. The explosion rocked the clearing, dirt and debris raining down, but far enough to spare Ethan's team. "Move!" I shouted, my voice raw, urging them forward. Ethan glanced back, his eyes wide, no trace of his earlier scorn. They reached the tree line, collapsing beside Michael and the hostages, safe for now. I sprinted back, bullets snapping at my heels, and dove behind a tree, my chest heaving. Michael gripped my arm, his voice low. "That was reckless, Sarah. You could have died." I met his gaze, forcing a calm I did not feel. "They would have died." He shook his head, respect mingling with worry. Ethan, catching his breath, muttered, "Insane." But his tone held something new, grudging awe. I ignored him, checking Watson's bandage. His face was pale, but he was stable. Nathan sat nearby, his eyes clearer but still distant, a man lost in his own failure. The jungle pressed in, its humidity a suffocating weight. The air smelled of mud, blood, and burnt powder, the canopy dripping with relentless rain. My radio crackled. "Extraction in 65 minutes, Captain," Michael said, his voice steady. "We've got 2 kilometers to cover and the enemy's still out there." I nodded, my mind racing. The alternate extraction point was our only hope, a clearing I had noted during our approach, far enough to avoid the enemy's trap. But the terrain was brutal, ravines, vines, and hidden snipers, and Nathan's silence was a wound I could not ignore. Flashback to my training years ago under a mentor who saw my potential but broke my trust. Captain Ellis, a grizzled veteran, had pushed me harder than the men, his praise rare but earned. "You see what others miss," he said once, handing me a map. But on my first mission, he ignored my warning about a flooded path, blaming me when soldiers died. "You're not ready," he sneered, his betrayal cutting deeper than failure. That moment forged me, drove me to memorize every contingency, to carry the backup radio Nathan mocked. I had vowed never to trust another's lead blindly, and now, with lives in my hands, that vow was my strength. I crouched beside the hostages, their faces etched with exhaustion. The woman still clutched the teenage boy, her eyes meeting mine. "You're going to get us out, aren't you?" she whispered. I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes." "But we need to move fast." The middle-aged man, his shirt torn, added, "We'll follow you." Their trust was a weight, heavier than Watson's body had been, but it anchored me. I turned to the team. We move in 3 groups again. "Michael, you're with the hostages. Ethan, you and Mason cover the wounded. I'll lead point, clear the path." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're taking point again? You're not invincible." I met his gaze, my voice firm. "I know the terrain." "We don't have time to argue." He looked away, his silence a concession. Michael checked his rifle, his trust unwavering. Nathan stood, his voice hoarse. "I'm operational, Captain." I studied him, his eyes sharper but shadowed. "Are you sure, sir?" He nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes." "But you're in command. They're following you." His admission was raw, a crack in his armor, and I saw the cost of it. I nodded. "Stay with Ethan. We'll get everyone out." The ravine ahead offered cover, its steep walls tangled with roots and vines. I signaled the team, leading my group, Ryan, Torres, and Rodriguez, toward it. My boots sank into the mud, the air thick with the rot of decaying leaves. The jungle was silent. Too silent. The birds gone, a warning I felt in my bones. I had served here before, knew its deceptions, hidden streams, sudden ambushes. My hand never left my rifle, my senses straining for the snap of a twig, the glint of a scope. We reached the ravine, sliding down its muddy slope, the hostages following with Michael. Ethan's group brought up the rear, Nathan moving with effort. The ravine's walls shielded us, but the enemy was close. I could feel their eyes. Halfway through, a branch snapped to our right, sharp and deliberate. I raised a fist, halting the team. My pulse steadied, training taking over. Michael, eyes left. Ryan, right. They nodded, rifles raised. The hostages froze, the boy's breath hitching. A shadow moved in the trees, then another. My radio crackled, Ethan's voice low. "Captain, movement on our flank. They're trying to box us in." My mind raced, mapping the terrain. The extraction point was a kilometer away, but the enemy was tightening their net. I had to act to keep us moving, but a single mistake would end us. I crouched, my fingers brushing the mud, feeling the weight of every life behind me. The jungle seemed to hold its breath, and then a burst of gunfire erupted, bullets slamming into the ravine's walls, pinning us down. The ravine's walls trembled as bullets slammed into the mud, spraying dirt across my face. I pressed myself against the slick earth, my rifle raised, the air thick with the stench of gunpowder and fear. The enemy had found us, their gunfire pinning my team in this narrow trench, a kilometer from the extraction point. I was Captain Sarah Kane, and the weight of every life, hostages, soldiers, even Nathan Cole's broken spirit, rested on my shoulders. The jungle was a cage, and I had to break us free. My team crouched low, their faces smeared with mud and strain. Sergeant Michael Chen scanned the left flank, his rifle steady, while Specialist Ryan Torres guarded the right, his young eyes wide but focused. Lieutenant Ethan Drake, with the wounded, hissed over the radio, "Captain, they're flanking us. We're sitting ducks." The hostages huddled in the center, the woman clutching her teenage boy, their breaths shallow. Nathan, slumped beside Ethan, was silent, his eyes clearer, but haunted. 60 minutes until the helicopters arrived, and the enemy was closing the noose. I scanned the ravine, my mind racing. The gunfire came from the right, sharp bursts from hidden positions. The extraction point was beyond a dense stretch of jungle, but the enemy stood between us and salvation. I had led us this far, through the clearing, past the grenade I threw back. But this was different. They were organized, relentless, and we were running out of ground. My fingers brushed the backup radio in my pack, the one that had saved us earlier, but it could not stop bullets. I needed a plan, and I needed it now. Flashback to a moment in training years ago when my mentor, Captain Ellis, had taught me to think like the enemy. "They expect you to run," he said, his voice gruff but approving. "Use that. Make them chase a ghost." His betrayal came later, blaming me for a mission's failure, but that lesson stuck. I had carried it through every operation, every sleepless night studying maps. Now, with the enemy's gunfire echoing, I saw the ghost we could become. A diversion to draw their fire, to give the others a chance. I crouched beside Michael, my voice low. "We create a diversion. I'll take a small team, draw their attention east, make them think we're flanking. You lead the main group to the extraction point." His eyes narrowed, worry etching his face. "Sarah, that's a suicide run." I shook my head, forcing certainty I did not feel. "It's a calculated risk. We go loud for 30 seconds, then ghost. They'll chase us, not you." Ethan overheard, his voice sharp. "You're not a martyr, Kane." "We need you." I met his gaze, surprised by his shift. "You need me to get you out. This is how." I turned to the team. "Michael, you take the hostages and wounded. Ethan, cover their rear. Ryan, you're with me." Ryan nodded, his jaw tight, trust outweighing fear. Michael hesitated, then gripped my shoulder. "Come back, Sarah." I nodded, my throat tight, but inside a voice whispered, Captain Ellis's sneer, "You'll never be enough." It fueled me, not with doubt, but with defiance. I would prove him wrong, prove them all wrong, even if it cost me everything. We moved fast, Ryan and I slipping out of the ravine's cover, crawling through the underbrush. The jungle was a maze of vines and shadows, the air heavy with rot and rain. My senses strained, catching the faint snap of a twig, the glint of a rifle scope. The enemy was close, their gunfire relentless. I signaled Ryan to a cluster of trees where we crouched, pulling grenades from our vests. "On my mark," I whispered, my heart steady despite the stakes. 3, 2, 1, mark. We lobbed the grenades east, their arcs cutting through the air. They detonated in a staggered roar, shaking the jungle, suggesting a larger force. Ryan and I opened fire, moving between trees, our shots calculated to mimic a flanking maneuver. The enemy responded, their gunfire shifting toward us, muzzle flashes lighting the trees. My radio crackled. Michael's voice, urgent. "They're redirecting. We're moving now." Relief hit me, sharp and brief. It was working, but we had seconds before the enemy realized our ruse. 30 seconds, then we ghost, I told Ryan, my voice low. We fired one last burst, then melted into the underbrush, moving silent and low. The jungle swallowed us, its shadows our shield. Behind us, the enemy peppered the empty forest, their shouts confused, searching for a force that was not there. My boots sank into the mud, vines snagging my legs, but I kept moving, Ryan at my side. We circled wide, aiming to rejoin the main group, but the jungle was alive, its silence a warning. Halfway back, a bullet snapped past my ear, splintering a tree. I dropped, pulling Ryan down, my pulse racing. They had spotted us, a patrol cutting through our path. "Stay low," I whispered, scanning the trees. 3 figures moved, their rifles glinting in the dim light. My mind raced. Fight, and we draw more. Run, and we lead them to the others. I signaled Ryan to hold, my fingers tightening on my rifle. The patrol passed, their boots crunching, oblivious to our presence. I exhaled, the tension easing, but the clock was ticking. We pushed on, the extraction point close, the sound of helicopter rotors faint in the distance. My radio crackled again. Ethan's voice, tense. "Captain, we're at the clearing. Hostages and wounded are ready, but the enemy's regrouping." "Where are you?" I pressed my comm, my voice steady. 300 meters southeast, moving to rejoin. I glanced at Ryan, his face pale but determined. "We're almost there," I said, more to myself than him. The jungle thinned, the clearing visible through the trees. I saw Michael waving, directing the hostages toward the helicopters descending through the mist. Relief flooded me, but it was cut short. A burst of gunfire erupted behind us, closer now. The enemy had realized our diversion, and they were coming. Ryan stumbled, his leg catching a root, and I grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. "Keep moving," I said, my voice sharp. The rotors grew louder, a promise of salvation, but the gunfire was a promise of death. We burst into the clearing, Michael shouting, "Move! Move!" The hostages were boarding, the wounded lifted aboard, but the enemy was on our heels. Ryan limped, his face tight with pain, and I slung his arm over my shoulder, half carrying him. Bullets pinged off the helicopter's armor, and I saw Ethan firing back, his face grim. Nathan stood at the ramp, directing the load, his eyes meeting mine. Gratitude, shame, respect. I pushed Ryan aboard, my muscles burning, and turned to check the team. The jungle roared with gunfire, the enemy breaking through the trees. I raised my rifle, ready to hold them off, but Michael grabbed my arm. "Sarah, get in!" I hesitated, counting heads. Hostages, wounded, my team, all aboard. Only then did I climb in, the helicopter lifting off, its blades slicing the air. Bullets struck the hull, a final defiance, but we were airborne, safe. Inside, silence fell, broken only by the rotor's hum. The hostages clung to each other, the boy's face buried in his mother's shoulder. Ryan sat, his leg bleeding, but alive. Ethan looked at me, his voice low. "That was insane, Kane. You pulled it off." I nodded, my mask intact, but inside, Ellis's voice faded, replaced by the faces of those I had saved. We were not out of the jungle yet, but we were alive, and that was enough. For now. The helicopter's roar filled my ears, its blades slicing through the jungle's heavy air, but the gunfire below still echoed in my bones. I leaned against the metal wall, my uniform caked with mud and blood, my rifle resting across my knees. The cabin was cramped, filled with the hostages' shallow breaths and the groans of the wounded. I was Captain Sarah Kane, and we had escaped the jungle's jaws, but the weight of what we had endured pressed against my chest, heavier than the chaos we left behind. I scanned the faces around me. The teenage boy clung to his mother, her arms a fortress around him, her eyes wet with relief. The middle-aged man, his shirt torn, stared at the floor, his hands trembling. Specialist Ryan Torres sat across from me, his leg wrapped in a hasty bandage, his face pale, but alive. Lieutenant Ethan Drake, his rifle still gripped tight, met my gaze and nodded, a silent acknowledgement that carried more than words. Sergeant Michael Chen checked the wounded, his movement steady, his trust in me a lifeline through the madness. Nathan Cole sat near the ramp, his eyes no longer vacant but shadowed, a man grappling with his own collapse. The rotor's hum was a fragile promise of safety, but I could not relax. My fingers brushed the backup radio in my pack, the device that had saved us when Nathan's failed. 65 minutes ago, I had thrown a grenade back at the enemy, led a diversion to draw their fire, and carried Ryan to this helicopter under a hail of bullets. Each moment was a scar, etched alongside older ones, a desert mission, a commander's betrayal, a child's scream I could not silence. I had let us out, but at what cost? The hostages' faces, their trust, their lives were my answer, yet doubt lingered, a whisper I could not shake. Flashback to my first mission in this jungle 2 years ago when I was a lieutenant under a commander who saw my gender as a flaw. Captain Harris had ignored my warning about a hidden stream, and we lost a soldier to its current. "You should have spoken louder," he said, his blame a blade. That failure drove me to study every map, every frequency to prepare for the worst. It was why I carried the backup radio, why I saw the boot prints Nathan dismissed. It was why I could not trust another's lead, not even my own, until I proved it with blood. The helicopter lurched, and a hostage gasped. I steadied myself, my eyes on Ryan. "You holding up?" I asked, my voice low. He nodded, forcing a weak smile. "Thanks to you, Captain." His words hit me, heavy with gratitude I did not know how to carry. I turned to the middle-aged man, his name, David, learned in the chaos of the compound. "You're safe now?" I said. He looked up, his voice hoarse. "You saved us. All of us." His hand reached out, grasping mine, and for a moment my professional mask cracked. His touch was warm, real, a reminder of why I fought. The cabin fell silent, the rotors droned the only sound. I closed my eyes just for a second and saw the jungle below, its tangled vines, its hidden snipers, its relentless rain. I saw the clearing where I had sprinted to the grenade, the ravine where we were pinned, the compound where the hostages had stared at me like I was their salvation. Each moment was a thread, weaving a tapestry of survival, but the cost was written in Watson's blood, Ryan's limp, Nathan's silence. Nathan shifted, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Captain." I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze. His face was pale, his arm in a sling from a graze he had taken in the final push. "I owe you an apology," he said, barely audible over the rotors. I froze. "You didn't." I studied him, seeing the shame in his eyes, the courage it took to admit it. "You don't owe me anything, sir," I said, my voice steady. "We all have our moments." He shook his head, insistent. "Not like you. This," he gestured to the cabin, the hostages, the team, "is because of you." His words landed like stones, heavy and unyielding. I wanted to deflect, to say it was duty, not me, but the team's eyes were on us, their silence a weight. Ethan, Michael, even Ryan, they had seen me take command, risk my life, carry them through. I nodded, my throat tight, and looked away, the jungle blurring outside the window. The ghosts of my past, Captain Harris, Captain Ellis, their sneers, faded, but not entirely. They never would. The helicopter banked, the extraction point behind us, the base ahead. I checked my watch. 40 minutes since we lifted off, the jungle a memory, but not a distant one. My mind replayed the final push. Ryan stumbling, the enemy breaking through the trees, Michael's shout to board. I had carried Ryan, my muscles screaming, bullets pinging off the hull. I had counted heads, ensured every soul was aboard before climbing in myself. That moment, standing on the ramp, rifle raised, was when I felt it. A shift, not in the team, but in me. The boy's mother looked at me, her voice soft. "You're not like the others." Her words were simple, but they cut deep, stirring something I had buried. I was not like Nathan with his medals and swagger, or Ethan with his sharp tongue. I was not like Harris or Ellis, who saw me as less. I was Sarah Kane, shaped by failure, forged by resilience, and in that moment, I was enough. Her words cracked my armor, and I felt the sting of tears I would not let fall. The helicopter's pitch changed, signaling descent. The base loomed below, its lights a beacon in the dawn. I straightened, my mask back in place, and checked the team. Watson was stable, Ryan's bleeding controlled, the hostages shaken but unharmed. Ethan caught my eye, his nod a silent vow. He was with me now, his skepticism gone. Michael's steady presence was a comfort, a reminder I was not alone. Nathan's gaze held respect, a bridge rebuilt in the fire of our escape. As we touched down, medics rushed the ramp, their voices sharp with urgency. I stood directing the wounded to stretchers, ensuring the hostages were guided to safety. David, the middle-aged man, paused, his hand on my arm. "I'll never forget you," he said, his eyes locking with mine. I nodded, unable to speak, and watched him go. His words a weight I carried into the chaos of the base. The jungle was behind us, but its shadow lingered. I had led us out, proved the voices wrong, but the cost was etched in every face, every wound. As I stepped onto the tarmac, my boots heavy with mud, I felt the team's eyes on me, not with doubt, but with something new, respect. Trust. And something else, a question, unasked but burning. Who was I beneath the captain's mask? I did not have the answer, not yet, but David's words echoed, a crack in the wall I had built around my heart. The base's medical bay hummed with urgency, the sharp scent of antiseptic cutting through the fog of exhaustion. I stood in a quiet corner, my uniform stiff with dried mud and blood, my hands steady as I typed my after-action report. The screen glowed, casting harsh light on my bruised arms, but I ignored the pain, just as I had ignored the medic's insistence to be seen. I was Captain Sarah Kane, and I had brought my team home, hostages, soldiers, Nathan Cole's broken pride, but the jungle's weight clung to me, heavier than the wounds I refused to acknowledge. Around me, the bay was chaos. Medics moved with precision, treating Private Watson's shoulder, Specialist Ryan Torres's leg, and the minor wounds of others. The hostages sat on cots, their faces pale but alive, wrapped in blankets as counselors spoke softly. I saw David, the middle-aged man, his eyes meeting mine across the room. He nodded, a silent thank you, and I looked away, my chest tight. Their survival was my victory, but it felt fragile, overshadowed by the cost, Nathan's collapse, Ethan's initial scorn, my own buried scars. I typed methodically, detailing the mission with clinical precision. The ambush, Nathan's freeze, my assumption of command, the diversion, the extraction. I described Nathan's incapacitation without judgment, my own actions without embellishment. Facts only, no room for the ghosts that haunted me. Captain Harris's blame, Captain Ellis's sneer, the child's scream from a desert night. My fingers paused over the keys, the memory of David's hand grasping mine in the helicopter surfacing. "You saved us," he had said, and I wanted to believe him, but doubt lingered, a shadow I could not outrun. Flashback to my first day in this unit 6 months ago, when I walked into the briefing room, the only woman among hardened men. Their eyes had weighed me, their whispers cutting token hire. Diversity box. I had stood tall, my voice steady, but inside, I burned. Captain Harris's words echoed from years before. "You don't belong here." I had spent every night since proving him wrong, studying maps, memorizing protocols, preparing for the worst. It was why I carried the backup radio, why I saw the jungle's warnings others missed. It was why I led when Nathan could not. But the cost was a solitude I carried in silence. Colonel David Harper approached, his boots clicking on the tile, his face unreadable. I stood, saluting, my report complete. He took the tablet, scanning it, his eyes narrowing. "Captain, this is thorough," he said, his voice gruff. "But it doesn't capture what I've heard." I met his gaze, my posture rigid. "It contains all relevant tactical information, sir." He set the tablet down, his expression softening. "I've spoken to the hostages, the medics, your team." "Everyone says you're the reason they're alive." His words hit me, heavy and unexpected. I wanted to deflect, to say it was duty, but the truth was raw. I had fought not just for them, but for myself, to silence the voices that called me less. "I was doing my job, sir," I said, my voice steady. Harper shook his head, a rare respect in his eyes. "You did more than your job, Kane." "Nathan Cole has requested a transfer. He recommended you take command of the unit." I froze, the words sinking in. Nathan, the Golden Leader, had seen me, really seen me. My composure faltered just for a moment, and Harper noticed. "He was insistent," he continued. "Said there's no one better qualified." "I agree." He handed me a folder, its weight solid, real. "Your new orders. Rest for 48 hours, then report for your first mission as commander." I took the folder, my hands steady despite the storm inside. "Yes, sir," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Dismissed, Captain," Harper said, a faint smile breaking through. "And well done." I stood alone, the folder clutched tight, the bay's noise fading. "Commander?" The word felt foreign, a title I had never dared imagine. I thought of the jungle, the grenade I threw, Ryan's weight on my shoulder, David's hand in mine. I had led them out, not as a token, but as a leader. Yet the ghosts remained, their voices quieter but present. I tucked the folder under my arm and walked to the mess hall, my steps heavy, the weight of the day settling in. The mess hall was quieter than usual, conversations hushing as I entered. I felt their eyes, not with the old discomfort, but with something new. Nathan stood, his arm in a sling, and offered a slow, respectful salute. One by one, others followed. Michael, Ethan, even Ryan, his crutches propped beside him. It was not obligation, but choice. A recognition that pierced my armor. I nodded, taking a seat, my face neutral but my heart racing. A young lieutenant, new to the unit, leaned toward his companion. "Is that the token officer I heard about?" he asked, his voice low. Ethan, his forehead bandaged, snapped, "That's Captain Kane." "She's the reason we're here, not rotting in that jungle. Show some respect." His words were fierce, a far cry from the man who had mocked me days ago. Michael and Ryan nodded, their silence a chorus of agreement. I ate quietly, the attention heavy, but it was different now, not judgment, but acknowledgement. As I finished, Ethan approached, his steps hesitant. "Captain," he said, his voice low, searching for words. "I was wrong about you. Dead wrong. You didn't hold it against us when it mattered." I met his gaze, seeing the man beneath the bravado, the one who had followed me through fire. "We're a team, Lieutenant," I said simply. "That's what matters." He nodded, a weight lifting, and walked away, leaving me with my thoughts. 6 months later, I stood at the head of the briefing room, the same room that had once felt like a battlefield. My team, men and women who had requested to serve under me, listened as I outlined a new mission. "Intelligence confirms 23 hostages in this facility," I said, pointing to a satellite image. "Expect booby traps." Ethan, now my second, asked, "Approach?" I traced a path. "Insert 5 kilometers out. Ethan, establish comms on the ridge. Michael, recon east." Triple redundancy on all channels. They nodded, their confidence in me a quiet strength. After the briefing, a young female lieutenant approached, her eyes bright with questions. "Captain, how did you deal with being seen as a token?" "Didn't it make you angry?" I paused, the weight of her question pulling me back. Harris, Ellis, the whispers, the nights of proving myself. "I never saw myself that way," I said finally. "I saw what I could do." "Eventually, they did too." She nodded, her face thoughtful, and I saw a spark of her own resolve kindling. As I walked the corridor, I passed a wall of photographs, the unit's commanders through the years. My picture was there, the first woman among them, but I did not stop to look. The acknowledgement that mattered was not on that wall, but in the eyes of my team, the lives we saved, the trust we built. The jungle had tested me, broken me open and shown me who I was. Not a token, not a failure, but a leader. David's words, the boy's mother's gaze, Ethan's respect, they were my reckoning, and I carried them forward into the next mission, the next fight, the next chance to prove I was enough.